August 28, 2013. The day started like any other in Brown County, Ohio, a small, peaceful community surrounded by rolling fields and winding roads. The sun began its slow descent in the late summer sky, casting warm hues of orange and red over the horizon. It was the kind of evening that whispered serenity, a time when families sat down for dinner or watched the world slow down as daylight faded. But not every evening ends in peace. On a desolate stretch of Route 68, an eerie silence replaced the usual hum of passing cars. A Jeep Wrangler sat motionless on the shoulder of the road. Its headlights dim, its engine silent. To a passing glance, it might have seemed like a simple mechanical failure, a minor inconvenience for an unlucky driver. But the truth, as it would soon be discovered, was far darker. Inside the vehicle lay a scene that would haunt this quiet town for years to come. Brittany Stykes, a 22-year-old mother-to-be, slumped lifeless over the steering wheel. Her once golden brown hair, now matted and stained with blood, framed her face as shards of broken glass glittered under the fading sunlight. The metal of the Jeep's doors bore jagged bullet holes, silent witnesses to the violence that had unfolded just moments earlier. But perhaps the most heartbreaking detail of all was in the back seat. A small, fragile figure, a child no older than 18 months, was strapped into her car seat. Her cries had long since faded, replaced by shallow breaths that barely betrayed the injuries she had sustained. Little Aubrey, Brittany's daughter, had miraculously survived, but she carried with her the scars of a night she would never remember. Who would do this? Who would target a young woman with so much life ahead of her? A mother, carrying her second child, with her firstborn just feet away. What kind of darkness drives such cruelty? These are the questions that have plagued investigators and haunted Brittany's family for over a decade. This is the story of Brittany Stykes, a case that remains unsolved to this day. It's a story of unanswered questions, strange clues, and a family left shattered by tragedy. But above all, it's a story of resilience and a quest for justice that has never wavered, even as the years have stretched on. Tonight, we revisit that fateful evening. We delve into the life of a young woman who deserved so much more and the mystery that continues to baffle even the most seasoned investigators. This is the case of Brittany Stykes. To understand the weight of Brittany Stykes' loss, we must first know who she was, not just as a victim, but as a person. Brittany was born on October 18, 1991, in Brown County, Ohio. Raised in a close-knit family, she grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and strong family values. From a young age, Brittany's bright smile was her defining feature. She had this infectious energy that could light up a room, making everyone around her feel seen and valued. Her family remembers her as someone who was always ready to help, always willing to lend a hand, whether it was volunteering at community events or simply being there for a friend in need. Her love for children was evident from an early age. It was no surprise that as she grew older, she dreamed of working with kids professionally. Brittany was more than just a kind-hearted woman, she was determined, resilient, and deeply devoted to her family. By the time she was 22, Brittany had already built a life centered on love and family. She was married to Shane Stykes, and together, they were raising their beautiful 18-month-old daughter, Aubrey. Brittany was also pregnant with their second child, eagerly anticipating the next chapter of their lives. But as is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. While the photos painted a picture of happiness, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Friends and family would later reveal that there were moments of tension, arguments that hinted at cracks in what otherwise appeared to be a stable marriage. Yet no one could have imagined that Brittany's life would be cut short in such a cruel and senseless way. Her family described her as someone who loved fiercely and dreamed big. She wanted nothing more than to see her children thrive and live the kind of simple, joyful life that she had cherished growing up. But sometimes, darkness finds even the brightest souls. Brittany's tragic death wasn't just a loss for her family, it was a blow to an entire community that had watched her grow, laugh, and love. They lost a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most heartbreakingly, a mother who never got to see her children grow up. And so we ask, what led Brittany Stykes, a young woman with so much life ahead of her, to that fateful night on Route 68? What unseen force or twisted hand of fate pulled her into a tragedy that no one saw coming? These questions would haunt investigators and leave her family searching for justice long after the headlines faded. It was August 28, 2013, a warm, late summer evening. The kind of night when crickets serenaded the countryside and the sky glowed with hues of red and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Brittany Stykes had just spent the day celebrating her father's birthday, surrounded by the people who loved her most. There were smiles, laughter, and the unmistakable warmth of family. But as night approached, Brittany had plans to leave. She strapped her 18-month-old daughter, Aubrey, into her car seat in the back of her Jeep Wrangler. Perhaps she hummed a song to soothe the little girl as they drove down Route 68, a familiar stretch of road that Brittany had likely traveled countless times before. The evening seemed ordinary, uneventful. But tragedy often strikes when we least expect it. At approximately 7 p.m., a passing motorist noticed Brittany's Jeep parked on the side of Route 68. Something about the scene seemed off. The vehicle was oddly still, its headlights dimming as the night grew darker. The motorist pulled over, curious but cautious. As they approached the vehicle, the horrifying truth revealed itself. Brittany Stykes was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. Her once golden brown hair was stained with blood, clinging to her face. The shattered windows glinted in the dim light, bullet holes marking the Jeep's exterior like jagged scars. But perhaps the most haunting discovery was in the back seat. Little Aubrey, Brittany's daughter, sat eerily quiet, strapped into her car seat. Blood stained her tiny face where a bullet had grazed her head. Somehow, miraculously, she was still alive. When first responders arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them for years to come. Brittany had been shot multiple times at close range. The inside of the Jeep bore the marks of chaos: shattered glass, blood splattered across the seats, and bullet holes that told a story of sudden, brutal violence. There were no immediate signs of a struggle. Brittany's purse remained inside the vehicle, untouched. There was no indication of a robbery. Her phone was missing, but nothing else appeared to have been taken. It was as if the assailant's only intention was to kill. But why? Why would anyone target a young mother with her child in the car? The brutality of the crime defied comprehension. As investigators would later note, this was no accident, it was a deliberate, calculated act. While Aubrey was rushed to the hospital and treated for her injuries, Brittany's family was notified of the tragedy. What had started as a joyful day celebrating her father's birthday had turned into a nightmare they could never wake up from. The small community of Brown County was shaken to its core. News of the shooting spread rapidly, leaving neighbors and friends bewildered. How could something so violent, so senseless, happen in their peaceful town? The crime scene on Route 68 became a grim reminder that darkness can find its way into even the most serene corners of the world. As investigators examined the evidence and spoke to witnesses, one thing became clear: there were more questions than answers. Who had ambushed Brittany that night? Was it someone she knew? Or was it a random act of violence? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, would they strike again? This was just the beginning of a case that would baffle investigators for years to come. A case filled with strange clues, dead ends, and a family left desperate for answers. The investigation into Brittany Stykes' murder began immediately, but from the very first moments, law enforcement faced a daunting challenge. The crime scene was as baffling as it was gruesome. Bullet holes riddled the Jeep Wrangler, shattered glass littered the ground, and blood stained the seats. Yet there were no clear signs of a robbery or struggle. It was as if someone had ambushed Brittany in cold blood, fired multiple shots, and then vanished into the night without leaving a trace. We had very little to go on. No witnesses saw the shooting happen. No security cameras captured the scene. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Despite the lack of immediate clues, authorities refused to give up. They combed through forensic evidence, hoping for a breakthrough. Bullet trajectory analysis suggested that the shooter had fired at close range, likely from outside the driver's side window. The precision indicated a calculated attack rather than a random act of violence. But who would want Brittany dead? That question became the central focus of the investigation. As detectives delved deeper, they began to explore three chilling theories. One of the earliest theories was that Brittany had fallen victim to road rage, a dangerous encounter with an aggressive driver that escalated into deadly violence. Ohio, like many states, had seen an increase in road rage incidents over the years. Tempers flared, and sometimes, these confrontations turned deadly. Investigators considered the possibility that Brittany may have unknowingly angered the wrong person while driving that night. We couldn't rule it out completely. But there were problems with the theory. For one, Brittany wasn't the type to engage in aggressive driving. And there was no evidence of a high-speed chase or any kind of collision before the shooting. The second theory was far more sinister, that Brittany was the target of a premeditated attack. But if that was the case, who would want her dead? And why? Brittany was by all accounts a kind, loving woman without enemies. But investigators knew that appearances could be deceiving. They began looking into her personal relationships, hoping to uncover any hidden conflicts. Was there someone in her life who harbored a grudge or had a motive for murder? The idea seemed unlikely, but it couldn't be dismissed. Unfortunately, nothing conclusive came from these interviews. No one could point to a person who would want Brittany dead. The lack of a clear suspect only deepened the mystery. As the investigation continued, detectives couldn't ignore a possibility that is tragically common in cases like this: domestic violence. Brittany's husband, Shane Stykes, was questioned multiple times. Some found his behavior strange, his story inconsistent. Rumors began swirling in the community. Had their marriage been as happy as it appeared? But there was never enough evidence to implicate Shane. He maintained his innocence, and investigators could not establish a motive or any direct connection to the crime. Still, the whispers persisted. Despite the extensive investigation, each theory hit a dead end. Road rage, a targeted attack, a possible domestic dispute. None provided the answers Brittany's family so desperately sought. Months turned into years. Leads dried up. And the case grew cold. Brittany's murder remained an unsolved tragedy, a wound that refused to heal. Her family continued to plead for justice, their voices echoing in a void of unanswered questions. But hope was not lost. In the years that followed, new developments would reignite interest in the case. A mysterious letter, anonymous tips, and forensic advancements offered a glimmer of hope. The fight for justice was far from over. In the next chapter, we'll explore the shocking new leads that breathed life back into the investigation and ask, will the truth about Brittany Stykes ever come to light? Years passed. Brown County moved forward, as small towns often do. People went about their lives, but for the family of Brittany Stykes, life had come to a standstill. Brittany's murder was never just a headline to them, it was a wound that refused to heal. The investigation had hit a dead end, becoming what investigators refer to as a cold case. But Brittany's family never gave up hope, and neither did the community. In 2018, 5 years after Brittany's murder, a glimmer of hope appeared: a letter. The writer, who chose to remain anonymous, claimed to know who had killed Brittany Stykes. The details were vague but chilling. The letter hinted at a dangerous individual with a history of violence, someone who had been involved in criminal activity before. The sheriff's office took the letter seriously, launching a renewed investigation. But the lead quickly went cold. The anonymous writer was never identified, and investigators couldn't verify the information. Despite the dead ends, the Brown County community rallied behind Brittany's family. Social media campaigns kept her story alive, with hashtags like #JusticeForBrittany spreading far beyond Ohio. Community members organized search efforts, scouring the woods near the crime scene for any overlooked evidence. Volunteers walked miles through dense brush, hoping to find anything that could crack the case. But their efforts yielded no breakthroughs. Rumors began circulating about another possible explanation, one far more sinister. Some speculated that Brittany had become an unintended target in a planned hit. The theory suggested that she may have witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see, or perhaps mistaken for someone else. But as compelling as the theory was, there was no concrete evidence to support it. In recent years, advancements in forensic technology offered a glimmer of hope. New methods for analyzing ballistic evidence and trace DNA meant that cold cases like Brittany's could be revisited with fresh eyes. Investigators revisited the evidence collected from the scene: the shattered glass, the bullet casings, even the clothing Brittany was wearing that night. But as of today, no new forensic breakthroughs have been announced. I pray every night that someone will come forward. I don't care how long it takes, we just need the truth. Brittany's mother, father, and siblings have become tireless advocates for justice. They attend vigils, speak to the media, and keep Brittany's memory alive for Aubrey, who is now a vibrant young girl. Aubrey, who miraculously survived that night, is growing up surrounded by love and stories about the mother who adored her. But for her family, the ache of unanswered questions remains. Who killed Brittany Stykes? And why? As we stand here today, more than a decade has passed since that fateful night on Route 68. Investigators continue to review the case, and Brittany's family remains hopeful that justice will one day be served. This story is far from over. Someone out there knows the truth. And until that truth comes to light, Brittany's story will continue to haunt those who remember her. For the Stykes family, August 28, 2013, marked the beginning of a nightmare that never truly ended. Losing Brittany was more than a tragic event, it shattered their world. But their grief didn't just linger inside their home, it rippled outward, affecting friends, neighbors, and the entire Brown County community. Brittany was the heart of her family, a loving daughter, a devoted sister, and a joyful mother. Her loss left a void that no one could fill. In the days and weeks following Brittany's murder, fear gripped the community. Brown County, known for its peaceful charm, suddenly felt dangerous. Families locked their doors earlier, and parents kept a closer watch on their children. Many residents wondered if there was a killer walking among them. The idea that such violence could strike so close to home left the community shaken. As the investigation unfolded, media attention poured in. News outlets from across the region covered Brittany's case, speculating on possible motives and suspects. But for the Stykes family, the media spotlight was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept Brittany's story in the public eye, ensuring that people wouldn't forget. On the other hand, it brought invasive questions and unwanted scrutiny. Perhaps the only bright spot in this tragedy was the survival of Brittany's daughter, Aubrey. Despite being injured by a bullet that grazed her head, she made a full recovery. Doctors called it a miracle. Her family called it a blessing. Today, Aubrey is thriving, a living testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. But even as time has passed, the weight of unanswered questions remains heavy on the Stykes family. Who killed Brittany? And why? Their search for answers is relentless. But so far, justice remains elusive. Years passed, but Brittany Stykes' murder case remained unsolved. Leads dried up, and tips became rare. Investigators were left staring at a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Yet, hope was not completely lost. In 2018, a new spark ignited the investigation. A mysterious letter was delivered to law enforcement, claiming to reveal the identity of Brittany's killer. The letter described a chilling scenario: a supposed hit ordered by someone with connections to Brittany. But as promising as this tip seemed, it ultimately led to a dead end. The author of the letter vanished, and their claims could never be verified. As years turned into a decade, forensic technology continued to advance. New methods of analyzing ballistic evidence and DNA testing brought hope to cold cases across the country, including Brittany's. Investigators revisited the crime scene evidence, looking for any overlooked clues. Brittany's Jeep, riddled with bullet holes, was re-examined for trace evidence. But so far, nothing definitive has emerged. While the investigation struggled to gain traction, the community refused to let Brittany's story fade into obscurity. Every year, friends, family, and neighbors gathered for candlelight vigils to remember her and to keep the pressure on law enforcement. Through the pain and frustration, the Stykes family remained steadfast. They became advocates for Brittany, working tirelessly to keep her case in the public eye. Aubrey grew up surrounded by love but without the mother who adored her. The family made sure she knew who Brittany was, a woman of kindness and strength. Despite renewed efforts and technological advancements, no arrests have been made. No definitive suspect has been identified. But the case is far from closed. The Stykes family continues to hold on to hope. Hope that one day, someone will come forward. Hope that Brittany's story will finally have a resolution. The road may be quiet now, but the echoes of that night still linger. The community waits. The family waits. And justice waits. As the years continue to pass, the tragic story of Brittany Stykes remains etched in the hearts of her family, friends, and the investigators who refuse to forget. Her unsolved murder stands as a grim reminder that justice delayed is justice denied. Brittany was not just a victim, she was a loving mother, a daughter, and a friend. Her life was taken far too soon, leaving behind a family shattered by grief and a daughter who will grow up without her mother's embrace. The unanswered questions surrounding Brittany's murder weigh heavily. Who pulled the trigger on that dark stretch of Route 68? Was it an act of rage, revenge, or a chilling case of mistaken identity? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, will justice ever be served? Despite the lack of closure, the Stykes family continues to hold candlelight vigils and seek public support, hoping that one day someone will come forward with the truth. Justice may seem elusive, but it is never beyond reach. Every tip, every lead, and every voice speaking up brings us one step closer to uncovering the truth. Brittany's story serves as a plea for accountability and a reminder that even in darkness, hope persists. Until the truth is revealed, her memory will continue to be honored, and the search for justice will never cease. If Brittany Stykes' story has touched you, there are ways you can help. Cases like this are solved not just by investigators but by the courage of ordinary people who come forward with information, no matter how small it may seem. Here's how you can make a difference. Share Brittany's story, spread awareness by sharing this video and keeping her name alive. The more people know, the greater the chance that someone with vital information will come forward. Provide information. If you or anyone you know has information about the murder of Brittany Stykes, no matter how insignificant it may seem, please contact the Brown County Sheriff's Office or your local law enforcement. Tips can often be the missing piece that cracks a case wide open. Support victims of violent crime. Consider contributing to organizations that assist families affected by violent crimes. Your support can help provide resources for those seeking justice and healing. Together, we can bring Brittany's family the closure they deserve. Justice delayed does not have to mean justice denied.